Good evening. Welcome to an evening with disability advocate AJ Link. My name is Meredith Adler. I'm the Assistant Director of the First Year Experience here at Mitchell College. And I have had the pleasure to work with a team of Mitchell College students, faculty, and staff to create a week of programming that we are calling Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging, and Social Justice Week. Yes, that's a bit of a mouthful. So we call it DIBS for short, as in I call dibs. So during tonight's presentation, which is our kickoff event for DIBS Week, please join in the conversation through either the Q&A or the chat, and I will use those comments and questions to moderate a discussion at the end of AJ Link's presentation. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to the 8th president of Mitchell College, Dr. Tracy Espy, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Thank you, Dr. Espy.
Thanks, Meredith. Welcome, everyone, to an evening with disability advocate AJ Link. As Meredith said, I'm Tracy Espy, president of Mitchell College, and I'm so happy that you're joining with us this evening. Tonight's talk kicks off a very special week here at Mitchell, Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging, and Social Justice Week. DIBS, I didn't know that until tonight. The team has put together an exciting and thought-provoking schedule of events and activities to help dive into many of today's pressing issues and empower them to be the change in the world. Change begins with listening to and understanding people's stories, and that's what we have invited you to do this evening with our esteemed speaker, AJ Link. AJ is going to tell his story and talk about the path he took to become a disability and human service advocate. He is also going to share ways for all of us to become social justice advocates. Before he begins, I'd like to tell you a little bit about AJ. AJ received his Juris Doctorate degree from George Washington University Law School, where he studied extensively on disability law, international human rights, and space law. While there, he chaired the Diversity and Inclusion Assembly for the Student Association and the Student Life Committee. He also founded the Atypical Student Society, a student organization for neurodiverse and disabled law students at the law school, and served as its initial president. AJ was the president of GW Law Space Law Society and co-chaired the Student Affinity Group Enterprise. He was awarded the Michael Dillon Cooley Memorial Award by his graduating class for his compassion and humanity in serving his fellow students. Today, AJ is currently an LLM law student in space law at the University of Mississippi School of Law, while also chairing the Center for Air and Space Law Task Force on Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity in Aerospace, and is a senior editor of the journal. Now, one of the things that I recently found out about AJ that I think is phenomenal, he was recently inducted into the Susan M. Daniels Disability Mentoring Hall of Fame, which is a very, very high honor. So congratulations to you, AJ. And I can tell you guys that if you are looking out there on LinkedIn or any other social media platform, you can probably catch this induction on March the 30th by clicking onto the link. One of the things last thing I want to say about AJ, it's been great meeting AJ since we've been sort of in this period of COVID. And when I think about all the things that we've learned from COVID and my experiences here, especially as the new president at Mitchell College, it's been wonderful to meet people all over the country that are committed to neurodiversity, that are committed to inclusivity, belonging. And I'm so pleased that we have the honor of hearing from AJ Link tonight. So thank you, AJ, for taking the time to meet with Mitchell College students, friends, faculty, and staff. Please join me in welcoming AJ Link.
Thank you, Dr. Espy, and thank you, Meredith. Thank you all for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, everyone who's here. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to say that for anyone who's here and is questioning whether or not they should or shouldn't be an advocate, just know that you don't have to be, right? And just keep that in the back of your mind. Whatever you want to do, it's the right decision for you, right? So I'm AJ. You heard the introduction. I'm wearing a green hat that has the Tampa Bay Rays logo because I'm from Tampa, and a black shirt. And my background is a gallery wall in my apartment with lots of pictures and my dogs off to the side. So I'll just talk about my story, and then hopefully we'll have enough time for questions. And I'd love to hear from y'all and hopefully be able to answer some of your questions. So I didn't start off wanting to be an advocate. I say that a lot, and it's really true. If you talk to enough advocates or even activists, a lot of times they kind of just find themselves falling into it, and that's what happened to me, right? So I'm autistic. I didn't find out I was autistic until I was 21, maybe 22. And so I kind of lived my life with this neurotypical experience, right? And there were all these things that I didn't know about in terms of ableism and accommodations and accessibility. But then I decided to go to law school. And once I got to law school, that's where I kind of started to be a self-advocate, kind of advocating for myself and some of the things that I realized that I need to be more successful in school, to be more successful in life, right? And as I was advocating for myself, I realized that there were lots of other people out there who kind of need the same advocacy and maybe couldn't, self advocate, or were scared of the consequences of the repercussions of doing that. And I was like, it's cool. I'll take that on. I think it's really important that everyone has a voice. And so I thought that was really important. And kind of through that work, Dr. Espy kind of talked about some of the things I did at GW. I just kept having opportunities to dive more into diversity, equity, inclusion work, whether that was for neurodiverse or disabled folks, whether that was for trans folks or gender nonconforming or gender non-binary folks. And, it's kind of just been a really cool journey. And I feel really fortunate that I've got to meet so many amazing people and have so many amazing opportunities, like kind of getting to chat with y'all tonight. And so I think it's really important to know that, you don't have to go out searching and looking to become an advocate, right? There's probably a personal experience that you're going through right now, or someone that you know personally that kind of just needs someone to speak up for them and give them a voice, right? And I think one of the things that drives me today in the work that I do is making sure that everyone feels seen and heard and has their humanity respected, right? I think that that's really important, that we come at this from a lens of respecting everyone's humanity. And I've been really fortunate kind of getting my start in advocacy, doing disability work, and that really focuses on accommodations and accessibility, right? Whether it's in the classroom or that's physical accessibility in the building. Think about accessibility for bathrooms. There's all kinds of ways to do it. I was really fortunate that that's kind of the root of my work and kind of how I got my start. And so I was able to take that accessibility lens to other places and other identities in the work, right? And so when you think about access, you think about accessing spaces that are generally male dominated, right? And how that can be uncomfortable for women or femme individuals trying to access those spaces and feel comfortable in those spaces, right? Access can mean so many different things. It could be financial access, right? It could be mental or emotional access, right? Where you feel like you're trapped from the space, even though you're physically allowed in there. Maybe you're emotionally blocked and don't have that access. And so I think it's really important, if you choose to be an advocate, and again, you don't have to be one, you kind of decide what kind of advocate you want to be, right? And for me, I don't think it was a conscious decision, but I know who I am now, and I know the person that I am now, and I want to be the kind of advocate where people feel comfortable coming to me, saying, hey, I have this issue. I'd love your support. I'd love for you to speak on my behalf. But I also want to be an advocate that shows people that they can be successful, kind of doing it their way, right? Like I'm not the typical or poster child for law school. I did a lot of extracurricular activities. I wasn't, super into reading all my readings and doing that way, but I kind of found my niche being an advocate, right? I took the tools I was learning in the classroom and kind of outside the classroom and used them to better my community, right? Whether it was my school community or my community in DC, or nationally working with the National Disabled Law Students Association. I think knowing the kind of person advocate that I wanted to be really helped me and really helped guide the decisions that I make, right? And I'm really fortunate that in the work that I do, my passions kind of get to merge, right? So we talked in the introduction and kind of mentioned space law. And I get to do human rights work, right? I get to fight for a more just and equitable future for all of us. And I get to do that in the realm of space law. And I think it's really important. And this is kind of something that, I have to deal with, and questions that I get is like, well, there are things that need to be fixed on Earth, right? There are problems on Earth that need to be addressed. There's a lot of inequity and unfairness where we're currently living, right? Like, why do you look towards the future? And I think that that's a really valid point. But for me, as we design and think of a better future for ourselves, I think that informs the decisions that we make now, and the society that we build now, right? And so I think it's really important that we start to look ahead and prevent some of the problems that we face in our society, for people down the road. And um, I think that social justice advocacy and social justice work and even activism isn't for everyone. I don't think everyone should do it. I don't think everyone should feel like they have to do it, right? But I do think being a kind, decent human being and respecting the humanity of our fellow humans is something that everyone can do, and it's something that everyone has to do, right? I think if we truly want to live in a just and equitable society, then everyone needs to pull their own weight. And that's as simple as being kind and affirming people's identities, and learning more about the identities that maybe you're not comfortable with, or you don't know a lot about, and kind of going out on a limb and just educating yourself on how you can create a better, more accessible, more accommodating environment for all folks, right? If that's through the disability lens, it's kind of learning about non-accessible spaces, knowing if you're going on outings that have stairs and folks who use wheelchairs or mobility aids can't access, right? That's not shaming your classmates. I don't know how it is at Mitchell, but in law school, there's just really intense shaming that a lot of disabled students face when students find out that they have accommodations, of testing accommodations, whether it be extended time or private testing, something like that. I'm kind of respecting and understanding that these things aren't something that should be criticized or nitpicked. These are things that are helping people survive in this world, which is what we're all trying to do, right? The world is an emotional and complicated place, and we're all just trying to make it the best we can. And I think that it's really important that we all just take that little extra effort to make it a better place for everyone else that we're trying to navigate this world with. And I think as you're figuring out who you want to be in college and what you want to do, always carry that with you, right? Whatever job and whatever profession that you choose to undertake, just kind of take that little tidbit with you, right? Like, just be a good person, just make it more accommodating and more accessible, right? And so with that, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the tangible things we can do to make things more accommodating for folks. One of the small things is having captions at your Zoom meetings, right? Hopefully things will be back in person soon, and everyone who can get vaccinated gets vaccinated, so we can do that. But always thinking about, does someone need a sign language interpreter, right? On your event flyers with your clubs, if you're hosting events, saying, if you require accommodations, reach out to us and we'll try to work with you to give accommodations, or anything like that. Another thing is like slideshow presentations and making sure that your contrast, past contrast checkers, when you're showing slides and your font's big enough. Like, these are really, really small things. But if we make them part of, our everyday thing, it makes the world so much more accessible for folks, right? When you think about universal design and how when you make spaces as accommodating as possible, it benefits everyone. And I think that's really important. Again, just, making the world a better place for all of us to navigate. I think when, you're hosting events, thinking about lighting, right? Or thinking about quiet spaces. So I'm autistic, and sometimes I get really, really overstimulated in social settings. And I apologize if I'm talking too fast. I do that, so I'll try to slow down to try to help the captioner. But quiet spaces is a great idea for social functions, right? Just a room off to the side where people can go and decompress and kind of work out that stimulus overload and kind of go back to the function so they can participate. I know for a long time I didn't attend a lot of functions because they didn't have those. And I was able to work to get them installed at GW. So, you know, whenever there was a big function at the law school, I felt comfortable attending because I knew I had this quiet space that I could always retreat to if I felt overstimulated. There are a bunch of other things. I've never been to Mitchell, but, you know, kind of thinking about the layout of the school, are all the buildings physically accessible for folks? Where are the ramps? Where are the elevators? Are there gender neutral bathrooms available? You know, that's part of accessibility, right? Do you feel comfortable going to the space knowing that you're going to be able to use the bathroom? Not only gender neutral bathrooms, but accessible bathrooms, right, with wide stalls so people can navigate if they're using aids, mobility aids. So I think it's really important that as you decide whether or not, again, you want to be an advocate, you think about these really, really small things. And it's easy for me to kind of talk about these things because I do this, right? This is like what I spend all day, every day doing, is talking accessibility, talking disability justice. But if you work at it, you kind of build this sense of normalcy, right? And it becomes second nature. I know something that I struggled with growing up neurotypical and not really understanding ableism is the ableism that's rooted in kind of the language that we use, right? So again, we're talking about small things we can do to make a difference. Like, so when you say something is crazy or stupid, or you call someone a moron, right? These are things that we all use, right? I'm still working on these, but these words are all rooted in ableism, right? Specifically talking about developmental and intellectual disabilities, right? And kind of that language that we use that maybe is barring someone who has an intellectual or developmental disability from contributing to the conversation and fully participating, right? Another one that's still often uses the R word. I won't say that one, but that's a huge slur to the disabled community, right? And there are people who are still very comfortable using it. If you want to learn more about that, just look at the Spread the Word campaign and what they're doing. And, you know, that's a huge issue, especially when you think about how the other day was, I think it was National Autism Award, or not autism, but Down Syndrome Awareness Day. And so, again, these are just really, really small things that we can do to make the world a better place, right? And so, again, talking about this lens of accessibility, you can extend that, right? You can extend that to racial access and access for Black people or Black and Indigenous folks of color. You can do that for especially what our Asian American Pacific Islander brothers and sisters are going through right now, and the kind of turmoil that's happened over the past year with the rampant xenophobia and bigotry directed towards them. There are really small things that you can do, and it's really easy for me as someone who's vocal to say, you know, if you see something that's wrong, speak up. But I understand that not everyone wants to speak up. Not everyone has that capacity, and we should respect that. But if you do have the capacity, I strongly, strongly encourage you to always speak out when you can, because I'm sure there are people who want to and can't, right? So if you feel comfortable taking that burden on, just know that there will be someone to support you, right? And even if there's no one to support me, no, I'll support you. You can always reach out to me personally and contact me, and I'll be there to support you, to stand in solidarity with you. I guess be in solidarity, right? That's another thing that I'm working on, because not everyone can stand, right? So I want to be in solidarity with you as you're going through these things. And yeah, I think that's really important. I don't want to take up a ton of time kind of rambling. I would love to answer questions if folks have questions, and I'd love to have a dialogue. So please feel free.
Sure.
If you have any questions
Yes.
for me, I'd love to answer them.
We do have some questions coming in. AJ, thank you for those remarks. You covered quite a bit of ground. You had a lot to say. Thank you so much. We had a comment in the chat, and we had a question in the Q&A. So I invite our listeners, our viewers, feel free to continue to add to the Q&A and through the chat. That's the best way to become part of the conversation. So from Jen in the chat, she says, I think it's great that you identify access in regards to the whole body. It needs to be said more in her experience.
Yeah, so I think the disability rights movement has been working for decades, right? You can go as far back as the 504 sit-ins that happened out in Oakland, right, and other places, and kind of people fighting for disabled people to be viewed not as charity cases, but as full individuals, right? And so when we talk about models of disability, right, there's the charity model and the medical model, where you kind of just look at someone and their disability, or and you kind of look down like, oh, I'm so sorry, oh, I feel bad, oh, I would hate if that happens to me, oh, I feel so sorry for you, right? But then we kind of transition into the models of disability that disability justice folks and disability rights advocates talk about when you talk about the social model or the diversity model, the relational model, all these kind of progressive models of disability, where it's like, what's really debilitating for folks is the world that they inhabit, right? So we'll take a wheelchair user, for example, and I'll give a comparison later. But like a person in a wheelchair isn't really disabled from accessing spaces unless that space prevents them from getting there, right? So if a space has a ramp to get in the door, if it has automatic doors, if it has elevators, the person using the wheelchair has access to that space, right? They're not disabled in that sense. They're not prevented from participating. And when you look at it that way, it's easy to see how we kind of forget that people with low vision who wear glasses technically have a disability, right? Like they need the accommodation of glasses so that they can better access the world, right? But we don't really view people who wear glasses as disabled anymore, right? Because it's just kind of another social variation, another kind of diversity, right? And so that's what the kind of way we need to look at all disabilities, right? And all disabled folks, right? That's not to say that disabilities aren't real or disabilities are imaginary, because there are real impairments, right? There are real physical disabilities and mental disabilities and developmental disabilities that people face, but kind of taking that lens to where we can be more accommodating so that disability isn't limiting them in participating in society.
Thank you. So we have a number of questions coming in. This questioner was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what was most challenging for you in speaking up and reaching out for change at GW.
Yeah, so again, I'm really fortunate. I think, I don't know if this is a personality trait that's born of my autism or if it's separate from my autism, but I'm really indifferent to kind of pushback and negative feedback. If I believe that something is right, or I believe that that's something that's really important to take a stand for, I'll do it, right? I don't really have an issue facing consequences or facing repercussions from administrators, things like that. So I didn't really find it difficult. I will say that it's hard as a single person to really enact change, right? If you really want to move the needle and create things, you need allies, you need support, you need a critical mass or a critical number of people that are all behind you, saying like, hey, this is important to all of us. This is a change that we want to make. And I didn't always have that at GW, but luckily I was there for 3 years and I was able to kind of build up a small little coalition of other people who cared about these things, right? And I didn't really talk about it, but being an ally is super important. You don't have to be disabled to be a disability ally, right? You don't have to be a Black person to be an ally to the Black community when you're advocating for racial equity, right? I think being an ally, I know a lot of people like the term accomplice now, is really important. If you genuinely care about creating a better, more equitable world, these are things that you should care about. And if you see someone advocating and they're advocating alone, again, if you have the capacity and you're willing to do it, I encourage you to go out there and support them.
Thank you. We have a comment from one of my students. Hi, Will. He says, I know how you feel about being autistic and struggling with learning to take more responsibility for your life because I'm exactly the same.
Amazing. Well, it's really cool getting to meet more autistic folks, and I'm really happy that at least in the work that I get to do and some of the amazing autistic folks that I get to meet kind of get to change the perception and of what it means to be autistic and what autistic people are capable of. So good luck to you, Will, and I'm sure you'll be amazing.
Right on. Thank you. All right. So we have another question. This questioner is curious about the shaming that you alluded to that some people experience, maybe with accommodations, and what we can do as a community to gently confront those actions.
So not to go on too long or large of a rant is our educational system needs to be fundamentally restructured in how we view academic success, right? And how we view intelligence and capability and participation in the classroom. But small things you could think of is making courses have optional final grades, right? So not everyone does well under pressure taking a test, right? Some people work better doing an oral presentation or a project or even writing a paper, right? And I know that this puts a lot of onus on the professors, which may or may not be fair, but kind of expanding what full knowledge of the course looks like, right? If you allow someone to write a paper instead of taking a test, maybe that person who would need testing accommodations like extra time wouldn't request that because they're more comfortable doing the paper, kind of having a week or a month or a semester kind of working on this paper. And they kind of have to avoid that situation, right? So the thing about universal design and creating truly accessible and accommodating spaces is if you do that, then a lot of people don't need accommodations, right? They don't need to self-accommodate, right? They don't have to hide their disability or hide who they are because they can find a nice little place to fit in, and it's just like everyone else. So that's just an example with grading. But in terms of stigma and being a student, right, it's defending your neurodiverse classmates who maybe have testing accommodations, or even your disabled classmates who have a note taker, right? Something that's really important and I really strongly advocate for is class recordings, right? I know that a lot of people are focused on recordings now that everything's online, but even before, right? Some people just have bad days, right? When you talk about mental health and you talk about anxiety and depression and all the things that go into that, some days are just really hard to get to class, right? Through no fault of our own. And you still want to participate, right? You still want to be able to contribute to the class. And having those class recordings is great for when you miss class. Flexible attendance policies is another one. These are kind of things that a lot of institutions push back on, but obviously I'm advocating for them. I think flexible participation, right? I know a lot of classes require class participation, but some people have really bad anxiety and don't like being called on in class, right? Some people may have a stutter or some type of speech impediment or what have you, and just answering questions in front of a crowd doesn't do it for them. Professors understanding that and being open to students saying, hey, I want to contribute to the class. Is it okay if I submit my answers pre-written to you before class and you read them out or someone else reads them out, right? Like, not that I don't want to do the work. I want to do the work. I want to show you that I'm contributing. I'm just not comfortable contributing in that way. I think there are tons of different things, and we can talk about this all night. I'll stop rambling. If you have specific questions, please email me, let me know, and we can talk about it more. But yeah, those are just kind of small things that we can do to kind of make at least the academic setting more accommodating for everyone.
I saw that some members of our faculty are on the chat or in the presentation and are working on UDL, Universal Design, and I think a lot of what you just said probably rings true to us and what we're trying to do. Thank you for that. So we have another question. This is a little bit off the topic we were talking about, but I think it's fascinating. What are your expectations with your LLM on space law?
So space law is still a kind of niche field. It's growing, it's expanding, it's going to be massive. But the reason that I went to Old Miss and I'm getting my LLM, or a big reason of it, is this task force that they're doing, right? And again, I'm really fortunate that kind of life is just, I guess, kind of lucky in that regard, that there's a task force that's working on diversity, equity, inclusion in aerospace at a school that offered a space law LLM. I was like, I want to be part of that. I want to contribute to that. Um, and it's kind of one of those things, like all the time, like I was like, I want to do it, I want to help. And then lo and behold, I get to become the chair of it because I was there and I was around and I was willing to volunteer. And so uh, I think at least right now, you don't need an LLM in space law to be a good space lawyer. I think it helps. If you think about kind of the way society operates and how credentials are important and all that. Um, but for me, the LLM was just an opportunity to learn more about the thing that I love and to get to do a thing that I love in terms of working with the task force. And for me, it was like, yeah, I like to do things that I like. And it was an amazing opportunity. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do it. What'll happen with my LLM? It'll probably just be kind of another degree that I have that people can see that I have, but kind of like my JD, it's not something that I use, right? So anyone who's thinking about law school, you can go to law school and you don't have to be an attorney, right? There's lots of other things you can do with a law degree. Um, yeah, so not that degrees aren't important, school's not important, but just know that there are things outside of whatever you went to school for, and that's all right too.
Thank you. So here's another question. Could you share any ideas or perspectives you'd offer to your fellow most impacted fighters, self-advocates, grassroots, grass tops leaders or activists, how to promote the awareness that access encompasses mental, emotional, and so forth? So ideas or perspectives you'd offer to your fellow most impacted fighters, self-advocates, and leaders and activists to promote awareness.
Yeah, I think there are lots of different tools, right? I think social media is a powerful tool. I think um, being able to just have Zoom events in places and at times where you maybe couldn't have before, having open office hours for folks to ask questions. I find that for me, it's really important that I take my kind of access to an extreme, and so I feel like I should be, as a person, really accessible to folks who want to communicate with me. Right? I totally understand folks have boundaries. I totally understand that some folks don't like communicating, and I'm one of those people. And my partner will tell you sometimes I just don't like talking. Right? Sometimes I shut down, and I just don't like talking. But for me, as an autistic person, and this has been the case for a lot of autistic people, communicating electronically is amazing, and it's not as much of kind of a burden. And so I answer emails all day, every day. I answer LinkedIn messages, Twitter messages, whatever. And I think just being really open and letting folks know that you're accessible and that you have information and resources available to them if they want it, right? I think putting yourself out there as someone who cares deeply about the work is kind of romantic in a way, right? And people kind of want to know more about what you're doing and want to know your knowledge and potentially want to join you in your efforts. I think that's a good way of recruiting allies and accomplices.
That's great, thank you. So we have another question. I believe you shared that your life was through a neurotypical lens through high school, and it was in college. Correct me if I'm wrong, that you
Yeah.
okay. So this particular questioner was wondering who advocated for you when you were in high school, and did those people help model a path for you? If it's more appropriate to answer that question at the college level, you could take it where you want to take it.
Yeah, so because I was undiagnosed, I didn't know I needed someone to advocate for me, right? I guess I wish I did. When I was a kid and in school, I had lots of quote unquote behavioral issues, right? And looking back on it, it probably had to do a little bit with me being autistic and not necessarily understanding a lot of the norms and the structure and things like that, right? And I still struggle a lot. I've done a lot of work. I've gone to a lot of therapy to kind of understand social norms more, but sometimes I still don't understand it, right? So an example is kind of like follow-up emails when looking for a job or looking to interview or whatever. I don't understand the concept of follow-up email saying like, "Hey, I just talked to you, but this is a follow-up email just to say I talked to you," right? And that's something that I struggle to get, right? But to answer the question, um, no one advocated for me, right? No one thought they needed to. I was just a kid that liked math, liked school in general, liked reading, but had a few behavioral issues and a few I guess it's oppositional defiance is what they call it, in terms of authority figures and not always getting along with them. But no one advocated for me, which is fine, right? I'm here now. I wish that more people were educated about what autism is and what autism could look like. And maybe someone would have been like, hey, maybe we can test this kid out or something like that. But no, I'm cool with it. I'm fine with it. I turned out okay. That's not the case for everyone. But also we kind of have to think about, we talk about access to getting a diagnosis, right? Sometimes being diagnosed is really expensive. Sometimes going and getting neurological testing done with or without insurance can be a burden, right? Access can be financial access too, right? We're talking about college and higher education. Access is definitely rooted in monetary privilege as well. So I think it's really important, again, when we're talking about access, we really think about, all aspects of access.
Thank you. So the next comment, I'm going to read it word for word, and I think it's really important that as educators, as students, we recognize that there's a wide variety of perspectives out there. And two people with autism, of course, don't necessarily feel the same way about how things should be changed or if they should be changed at all within their environment. So I think you'll understand what I mean when I read this comment. Hi, AJ. As an autistic person myself, I honestly doubt that the policy changes you advocate for, such as universal design, are necessary, and I believe they would waste taxpayer money. Why do you think that autistic people need this level of fundamental change in our K through 12 classrooms? I am not trying to belittle you or your work. I am just trying to have an honest discussion.
Yeah, so I think two quick points. I don't really specialize in K through 12 education. A lot of the changes I were talking about were higher ed, undergrad, graduate, um, doctorate level things. But two, I think that universal design is not just for autistic folks, right? There are people who have ADHD or dyslexia. There are people who are going through severe anxiety or severe depression. I think that thinking that this is just for autistic individuals kind of misses the point of universal design, right? I don't think it's a waste of taxpayer money to make sure that every student is afforded an equitable and accessible opportunity to be successful in the classroom if that's what they want to do. I don't think that's a waste. I think there's lots to talk about in terms of the way our government uses money or wastes our money. But I think providing an educational system where students who often fall through the cracks can thrive benefits society. I think that's an investment. I don't think that's a waste of money. Whether that's having wider doors in the classroom, maybe that whether that's having more schools with less stairs, whether that's having quiet spaces and decompression rooms in high schools and middle schools instead of sending in school resource officers that handcuff 8 and 9-year-old kids, allowing them to decompress, whether that's having a basket of STEM toys that teachers don't have to pay for out of pocket, like they do with other supplies, so kids can kind of fidget in class and instead of being disruptive for those who are ADHD or autistic or whatever, whoever needs to STEM during class. I think there are tons of investments that we can make that are actual investments in students and student success that aren't just throwing away money. And so I would say that. And again, I preface it. The kind of things I was talking about were at the higher ed level, and those also don't cost all that money, right? It doesn't cost all that much money to ask a professor to change their syllabus to have an optional final or a paper, right? The professor's already getting paid. It's not like they're paid hourly, at least not to my knowledge. They're paid by semester or by credit hour or what have you. So those aren't things that are costing more money. Those are just intentional decisions we can make as individuals. So that's what I would say.
That's a great answer. Thank you. I think it relates back to something you said earlier that I loved, which was that you wish that everyone can be seen and heard and have their humanity respected. And that's just sort of like a basic need we have as people. So we have another comment. I am also autistic and I do not have access to testing yet. AJ was addressing access, which is a legal concept enacted into our society internationally. Okay, and that's my reply to the previous comment. Okay, and John David, got it. I'm sorry, I lost the thread. Sorry, people.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that when you talk about legal protections, right, the U.S. has the ADA. We're not a part of the Convention on the Rights of the Persons with Disability, which is a UN treaty internationally, but there are laws that protect disabled individuals in the U.S., right? When we talk about education in K through 12, there's an IDEA that has IEPs, individual, I forget the E, plans, development plans, learning plans, but people don't get IEPs in higher ed, right? So a lot of people go through K through 12 and they have a ton of support, and they're really successful and they're thriving because they have these support systems that accommodate them in the things that they need in order to be successful. But then they get to college and then they no longer have an IEP, no longer have the support system. They're asked to navigate disability services offices by themselves without the proper tools to know how to do it. And then they struggle, right? They falter. And then I think that beyond just legal protections, again, it's intentional decisions by the rest of society about who we want to include and who we're leaving behind, right? If you truly want to bring people with us, then these are really, really easy decisions to make.
Thank you. So this is from Michelle. Hi, AJ, fellow GW alum and current parent of a Thames student. I work in the Office of Diversity for a large firm. What do you think are the top things employers can do to interview, hire, and retain diverse talent? Great question.
Wow, I love this. So I do this work a lot and I butt heads with firms a lot. The first thing is include disability and neurodiverse in your diversity initiatives, right? There's so many diversity initiatives out there now: diversity, equity, inclusion, diversity and belonging, DIBS, like there's all these things that are going on, right? But a lot of them don't include disability. And a lot of times I'm just sending emails saying, hey, I checked out your website's diversity page and you do not mention disability one time, right? So that's the first thing, right? Just highlighting disability and bringing it to the table. Two, it's changing what your recruitment practices look like, right? So like a lot of recruitment, at least in the law world, happens at mixers, right? And happy hours and things like that. Having alcohol at your events is actually an accessibility concern, right? I know a lot of people feel more comfortable, feel more sociable with alcohol, but actually not having alcohol at your events is more accessible, right? It's more accessible for people who were alcoholics and are now sober. It's more accessible for a lot of disabled folks who can't be around alcohol, things like that. But also what we look for in an interviewee, right? So I know that virtual interviews have really taken off and it's helped a lot of neurodiverse folks because there's less emphasis on eye contact, right? So that's something that I struggle with sometimes. It's either, I'm not looking at the person or I'm staring at them too much. And kind of like when you're going into an interview, a lot of people have said, well, did they make good eye contact? Because apparently that's a quality that makes a good employee, which I think is wild, however that came about. Or, you know, they had a firm handshake, all these kind of weird things that don't really matter. Um, uh, in your job description saying, you know, the minimum requirement, you have to lift 50 pounds. There's rarely an office job or a professional job where you have to be able to lift 50 pounds. I'm sure like maybe once in a while you would have to, but there are also other people in the offices, right? So kind of framing who you're recruiting, the more accessible your recruitment is, the wider net you're casting, the more diverse talent you're going to bring in, right? I think another thing, and again, this is just me speaking, is kind of grade minimums, right, or GPA minimums for when you're looking at candidates. Um, I don't. Again, this is just me, so no one has to agree with this. I don't believe that grade truly dictates someone's comprehension of the material or the effort they put into the class, right? Someone could get an A or a B in a class, not really pick up on it, just happen to know what the teacher's looking for, and kind of coast through, where someone, you know, who had to put in extra hours, had to study a lot harder, and they got a C or a B, and that's the best of their ability, right? But, you know, what kind of person are you looking for? Are you looking for someone who's going to coast by? Or are you looking for someone who's willing to put their best effort in to work at it, and kind of do the best with what they were given? So I think like we really have to reshape kind of the expectations that we're setting for the people that we're recruiting, but also recruiting more people and casting a wider net. Also, yeah, raise high, GW.
That's great. Thank you so much. I skipped a question earlier that I'm going to come back to. So this is about language, and bless you. And this question, I mean, language is a really powerful and important tool when we're working with, whether it's disability or diversity, inclusion, belonging. When we were making the title for DIBS, we spent a long time trying to figure out which words we wanted to have in our week. This particular question is, what can we do as a community to change the dis in disability? Because perhaps that implies other, apart, asunder. What do you think of the word disability?
Yeah, so there are multiple tracks of thought on this. I'm cool with disability. I know I was in a meeting today where someone called it diverse ability. And some people say different abilities or differently abled. I'm cool with disability, right? Under the law, I'm autistic, and you know that's a disability. To me, that's, you know, as casual as saying I'm a black person, right? Like that's just my identity. I think that sometimes, especially allies, get kind of caught up in this language, and I guess it comes from a good place, like trying to be accommodating with the language. Um, but I think that also erases the experiences of disabled folks, right? Um, and the experience is what they go through. It erases um, kind of their life and their identity for a lot of people. A lot of people strongly identify as being disabled, and that's important to them. Um, I'm not going to begrudge someone for using differently abled, or diverse ability, or all the kind of wild names that are being thrown out. But I guess at the end of the day, what are your actions saying, right? I don't care if you say I'm differently abled if you're not making your space accessible for me. That does absolutely nothing for me. So I know there's a battle over language. I'm not gonna, you know, say right or wrong. I'm gonna say that I identify as disabled. A lot of the disability advocates that I work with identify as disabled, and you know, um, that's on you. That's a personal decision, right? Just like it's a really personal decision whether or not you disclose your disability, right? You know, you tell people how you want to be identified, and you go from there. Um, you know, if I meet a disabled person who's like, I don't like being called disabled. I don't view myself as disabled. I'll respect that. How would you like to be identified? What would you like me to say? I'll do that because I want to be accommodating. I want to be accessible. But for me, disability is fine. I think disability is a really important identity to have and elevate.
Thank you. So the next question is for me. If someone asks me, I work with first year students. If they ask me, Meredith, what are some of the things that you would most like to see happen in first year? I've got my hot list, right? There's like this top 3 things that I'd really like. If I had some money, you know, if I could get that magic grant. AJ, what are your like top 3, the 3 things that if you could wave that magic wand or get that ginormous grant that you would like to enact today? Think big. This is stalling for time for people to add more questions to the chat too.
Yeah, I think one thing which is being pushed right now, or was being pushed with the minimum wage hike, was the abolition of sub-minimum wage for disabled employees, right? Because a lot of disabled employees can be paid pennies an hour because they're disabled, and I think that's wild. I would do that. It's moving forward. There are a lot of people who are doing it or pushing for it. I got to work on a few campaigns this last cycle, and they had it in their platform, which was amazing. So that's coming. I don't know if I need $1 million, but I guess that would kind of help. What's another thing? I'd like adequate Social Security disability funding, right? Sometimes these folks live on hundreds of dollars a month, maybe even less, and they can't have really good jobs because if they make too much money, then they lose their Social Security disability insurance. Kind of revamping that system to allow disabled folks who have full lives and participate in the workforce if they want to, but also still have their coverage. And I guess tacking on to that, and maybe this is 3, maybe this is 2.5, is genuinely affordable healthcare, right? I know a lot of people are against free healthcare. I'm not, but I will meet folks halfway. I guess I don't have to because this is my wish list. But really affordable healthcare, right? There are lots of people who can't go to the doctor when they're hurt, when they have a temporary disability, and then that temporary disability turns into a permanent disability, right? Because they weren't able to get the adequate medical care that they need. There are lots of people who go into bankruptcy and major medical debt because they can't afford to keep their bodies healthy, right? And I say healthy, but I don't mean like non-disabled, but like just generally healthy and able to navigate the world. I think that's really, really costly, and it's really hurtful. And, you know, I talked about earlier having access to medical care, right? In terms of, you know, psychological testing, a lot of mental health care is just really unaffordable for the folks who need it most, right? And that should be covered. That should be affordable, if not free. And I think it's really important that when we think about, someone was talking about wasting taxpayer money, like where are we putting our money? I often talk to folks who question, you know, some of the things that I offer. Well, your money is your values, right? Your investment is your values. I know that there's a fellow GW alum on here. GW buys a ton of real estate, right? That's kind of one of the jokes about GW is it's just a real estate company, right? Which I guess is fine, right? They want to grow their resources, they want to grow their endowment and their assets or whatever, but, you know, are they investing in student care to the point that students feel like they're getting their $65,000 a year's worth? So yeah, those would be my 3 things.
Granted.
I'm sure there's more, but I was trying to think on the spot.
I'm waving my magic wand for you, AJ. We're gonna get these done. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, so I think that's the end of the questions in the chat and the Q&A, but I wanted to tell you that so many of the people who asked questions then followed up with lovely statements of gratitude. and really your answers meant quite a bit to them. And I wanted to also thank you on behalf of Mitchell College, just the planning committee. You've taught us so much about how to work with live captioning, how to make sure that our advertising is appropriately labeled with the access to our accessibility office. These are things we probably should have known and should just do. And I think you were the wake-up call to make sure we do those things. So it's very much appreciated. Thank you from us for that.
Thank you for doing those things. It makes things more accessible for people to attend and participate. And I think that, you know, that's what I try to do, at least on a small amount.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And we have tomorrow, we have a panel of mostly high school and college students who are going to be talking about their paths to become social justice advocates. And I was wondering if you had any words that I could give them tomorrow as sort of tonight's send off to tomorrow of something you would like them to know about their path, about being a social justice advocate as a young person.
So the phrase that I always use kind of in my closing remarks to folks when I'm done is be unique, be authentic to the best of your ability. And what that just means is don't be afraid to be yourself. I know that it's a struggle. I'm not going to say that it's easy, but I think something that's really important, and I talked about this earlier, is giving people the confidence to be themselves, whatever that looks like, however they want to present that. Just be fully yourself, right? And whatever you're doing, bring that to the work that you do, because it's important, right? I know that I feel like I'm not, like a really big disability advocate, or at least I try to feel that way. But kind of people look at me and they look at what I do, and a really small thing is like the pictures that I use for events like this or on my LinkedIn, right? People say you should be more professional or blah, blah, blah. But I was like, that's not me. That's not who I am. You know, that's not how I come to the table, right? And there are consequences to that, right? Some people won't take me seriously. Some people won't offer me jobs or speaking gigs or whatever because of my pictures, but also someone's like, hey, it's really cool that your picture isn't like everyone else and you're just yourself, right? And so I think that's really important that you at least give that space to folks to be themselves. And I think the best way to give space to folks to be themselves is to be yourself as authentically as you possibly can.
Thank you so much, AJ. We've so enjoyed having you with us. There's some lovely comments coming through in the chat. Thanking you for your time. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening for our meeting with AJ Link. There are events throughout the week as part of our diversity, inclusion, belonging, and social justice event. You can check out our Mitchell website for more information. We hope you will join us. Have a great night.
Bye, y'all. Thank you so much for having me. Be safe out there. Safe travels to everyone. Thank you so much.